If you're listening to this, then you've somehow found our podcast. I'm Zoe Silber.
I'm Kerri Clark.
And this is Thanks for the Feedback, a podcast about brands, culture, and all the shit that comes with it.
We're longtime brand strategists, business partners, and friends who meet every Friday to talk about what's going on in the world of brands. So we figured we'd record our conversation and share them with you.
If you love it, great. If you hate it, we totally understand. All right, this is Thanks for the Feedback podcast, episode 1. And today we're going to be talking all about Coachella.
Let's go.
Kerri, you're very passionate about Coachella. I will hand the mic over to you to kick it off.
Okay, I'm not very passionate about Coachella itself, but I do have a lot of thoughts and feedback. So, as I was obviously watching two things. One, and they're interconnected. One, the Rhode pop-up, and two, Justin Bieber's performance, obviously, as a millennial woman. How can I not? I had a lot of thoughts about something that we actually talk about all the time, which is brands and the idea of belonging and how you can create that real sense of community. And I think both instances did it really well, one in a really polarizing way. So first, let's talk about Mr. Bieber.
Yes, let's do talk about Mr. Bieber.
Let's first of all just moment of appreciation for that beautiful man. First and foremost.
Yeah. I know. And even as a lesbian, he's a beautiful man.
We can appreciate the beauty. I don't know why I said we, I'm a lesbian. But
there's still time.
There is still time. Okay. Mr. Bieber and belonging. I feel like if you were on TikTok at all this weekend, there was so much polarizing chatter about his performance. There were people who were like, I loved it. I love that it was stripped back, low key, that he was just on YouTube. And then there were people who were like, this is so lazy. And I hate everything about what he did. And I actually think that polarization is the sign of someone creating something that is so meant for their core community that people who are on the fringe don't get it. And it's something that we talk about all the time of the brands that are so diluted and that don't last are the ones that try to be all things to all people. And I thought his set was such a good example of distilling what really connects with your core audience and making something exclusively for them that makes them feel seen, connected, really belonging to the moment that you're creating. And I thought I'm sure it was intentional. I thought it was so interesting. I think if there's anybody who was probably maybe in our age group, let's call it the back half of our 30s. You were older than he was when he started, right? He was a kid. And so you watched him come up on YouTube and he would do these performances. He would do all of this kind of a cappella stuff. And I think in the way that he built his set for Coachella, that's exactly what he was pulling from. And the audience that he was speaking to were people who used to watch him there. And I thought that was really cool.
And so, okay, so he I watched bits and pieces of it, but he scrolled YouTube.
Yes.
And what, played them or did he sing along to them? What happened?
So it was a little bit of both. There were ones where he would sing along with his younger self. He also kind of took fan requests-ish.
Okay.
And so I just thought the medium of it was really interesting because I'm I actually don't think it was lazy at all. I think it was very intentional and strategic and calculated because he understands his fan base and what they're going to connect to. And the other thing that I think was interesting that I was talking about with a few girls here this weekend was if you were below a certain age, it probably just wasn't going to hit for you because you weren't there from the beginning to experience it. His last two albums, that's the Bieber that versus really watching his career and sort of how it evolved. And I think that is sort of the disconnect that you're seeing is the people that don't get it, you don't get it because this wasn't for you.
Yeah. And I also feel his whole thing now is doesn't he have a new label? He has new management. He left Scooter Braun, which is kind of crazy. But he did all that in a way where he's signaling it's such a dumb word, but his rebirth. And
Yeah.
so it's almost like I think people view this as like the stripped back, like reflection of like what he did in the past, what got him there, and kind of like almost like signaling like a new beginning.
Yeah.
But also to that end, like um he didn't have to pay like royalties or something by like actually not streaming the music, which was kind of cool. But what I had to say about that was remember his Grammys performance was when he was like in his boxers and everyone was like, oh my God, like freaking out. Like there is something to say about Justin Bieber that like say what you will about his music, about his personality, his tattoos, whatever. He is not lazy.
Yeah.
Nor is he like someone who doesn't think about what he's doing. Like he's incredibly intentional, especially if you're doing Coachella performances. Like he's not going out here. If he's standing up on a stage somewhere in boxers, there's a lot of thought that went into that.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
I think that people who see things that celebrities, whether musicians or actors, whatever, do, and they're like, oh my God, that's so lazy. It's like, you're just an idiot. They're not lazy. Like you just don't get it.
Exactly. Well, I think like I don't know, one of the things that I did think was so interesting and looking at to your point like a lot of his performances recently and sort of just like the vibe recently is like he's he's doing him. Like this is all very on brand for him. Like this is the new to your point like thing that he's sort of putting forward and like really owning I think who he is and like wants to be as an artist. And
Yeah.
I think like look, he's a massive global star. He has had mass appeal. He has done all of the pop hits and the things and the tours and like all of the stuff that appeals to that mass audience. And I think he's also probably at a point in his career where he doesn't have to do that anymore and he can actually create exactly what he wants for exactly who he wants, which I think is what you're seeing him do. And again, when you are true to the vision and like bringing it back into the brand world, true to what your brand stands for, you're gonna polarize some people. You are not gonna be for everybody. And that's okay. That's actually the point. And so I think it's just like you're seeing him go from this like mass market brand into a more independent artist who like really is controlling his vision in a super tight way. And the people that maybe were down with like the pop music of it all are like, this isn't what I wanted. And it's like, well, it's not for you.
Well, on that note, it's like I think that people, granted, like a I'm jaded and cynical because I work in brands and I live in New York City, so I'm like have a different perspective, but like I think the average person doesn't understand that an artist, especially at that level, is a brand.
Right.
Like, yes, make fun of people and be like, "Oh,
Like,
like, like, oh, like." I mean, everyone. I think whether or not people understand that something is a brand, and you label people from Brooklyn. I'm laughing because like I'm literally sitting here in Brooklyn and I was on the L the other day. I'm like, fuck all these people. But like everything is a brand, right? You have a category, you have a perspective, it's the way you dress, it's the way you talk, it's like what you do, it's how you think, it's what you stand for, all of that. That like is essentially a personal brand. And I think that people don't understand that like being an artist, especially to that level, like is a personal brand. Like, don't you see
yeah,
that with Taylor Swift? Like
totally.
and Taylor Swift, from an audience perspective, like, she alienates a lot of people when she, like, switches up the style or puts in, like, tongue-in-cheek, like, innuendos or whatever and, like, kind of skews a little more Sabrina Carpenter, but, like, all of that is, like, a very intentional brand, and, like, just because Justin Bieber is, like, scrolling YouTube doesn't mean that that's not intentional. That's specifically what he's doing for his brand.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
totally. Totally. I think it's funny to watch sort of like the backlash of it all because I think you have you have people who don't understand perhaps how every move that these people make is so strategic in teeing up whether it is the continuation of brand or like the next evolution of brand. And I actually think that's something that he's done really well as he's evolved as an artist is like there's always been continuity but there's also always been newness. And I think when we always talk about this in like the true brand capital B space, right, it's like that's actually what people have a really hard time figuring out is how do I continue to grow? How do I continue to evolve while keeping like my core customer base or my core audience along for the ride, but still creating opportunities for new audiences to have what you're doing resonate with them. And I think in that sense, he kind of is like this masterclass of evolution of brand because you have the people that have been following him from day one who are still like, yeah, this is my guy. And then you look at half of the people that were at Coachella who are probably under the age of 24 who also know every single song that were on his past two albums. And like, that's pretty cool when you start to look at it that way of like how he's been able to kind of pull through this like red thread of like what makes him Justin Bieber.
Do you think that you see that do you think that you've seen him execute it more, I don't wanna say flawlessly because nothing's flawless, it's whatever, it's the point of being human, but, like, more seamlessly than, like, a Miley Cyrus? Now, I see Justin's, like, past few eras as kind of like the Miley Cyrus, whatever era that I forgot what album it was where she was,
Like a little
you know,
grungy.
performing thick. Yeah, like, she was, like and everyone's like, "Oh my god, Miley Cyrus changed so much," and it's like, no, this is, like, a very classic evolution of a female pop star going from kind of, like,
Right.
especially like a Disney star into, like, what the adult version of her is, and I feel like Justin also went through that,
Yeah.
but, like, I mean, he did get backlash. I don't know, do you like, where do you how do you think about that?
I mean, I think like in I would say looking at it from a an industry perspective, what I also think kind of adds a little spice, and you saw it with Taylor too, is like the rights to your music, right? And so he
Yeah.
also recently just sold a lot of that. And so I feel like once that happens, you kind of have to start fresh a little bit because you are building from scratch, right? I mean, like, I don't know exactly what album the rights went up to, but like, I would have to imagine it's a pretty significant amount of them. And so
Mhm,
I do wonder how much of that evolution is tied to that and sort of like really being focused on what is that next chapter. Because, like, from a financial and a business standpoint, that actually is really important now that he sort of is like putting that chapter to bed. And so I think like maybe talking about from like a Miley to a Justin through line, I'm like, is there a little bit more, this like sounds crazy to say, but like maybe a little bit more pressure on like what he's about to do next because it has such crazy financial implications for him? Like, I don't know.
yeah, totally, and you look at someone like Taylor Swift who was just like, "Fuck you, I'm gonna re-record everything and, like, not have to deal with your bullshit."
Yeah.
Cool,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, but I feel like on the point of community, it's like, I think that you see artists do this obviously because they're artists, like, they end up alienating people, if you're talking about a personal brand, like, you end up alienating people a bit more easily because you know, music is nostalgic, it's emotional, it's you see it in a different way, you have a connection with the artist, and you feel like they see you, they understand you. When they change, you're like, "How could they?" Like, now I don't feel
Yeah.
seen or understood, but I think from a community standpoint, like, you know, to your point before, it's like the people who get it,
Yeah.
and the people who don't, and it's like you I don't know, you connect on kind of like a different level than the average just, like, person who's listening to his music. I'm like, "Oh, I love Justin Bieber."
Yeah. Well, I mean, thinking about it, because this is actually all I could think about, like watching his set and his performance, was how many through lines there are to great brands. And so, because like I'm sick
Yeah, take a moment, be like, "I'm such a fucking loser. All I do is think about brands."
literally like, why am I the way I am? It's it is my own personal version of hell. Just like can't live like a normal person in the world, you know? Like just
Yeah.
enjoy a Coachella set. But what I kept thinking about was, and like, I feel like we have this conversation all the time of brands right now and how there is so very little that is actually interesting in the brand space in terms of like, you know, these new brands coming to market aren't really doing a lot that's disruptive. They're sort of like learning from what brands in their category have done. They're optimizing, they're, doing it a little bit better in like a little bit of a flashier, sexier way. And I think what is kind of like top of mind as I was watching this set is the idea that he kind of took a big swing in terms of like, this obviously was very strategic. He, as an artist, has a very particular point of view. He has a massive team of both marketers and a production team. And so, like, this was not just I'm going to go up there and I'm going to play some YouTube stuff. Like, it was very strategic. And, like, it could have absolutely flopped with everybody. But, like, he took a big swing. He knew his core audience. He probably had some suspicions that like this will resonate really deeply with them. And isn't it better to take a big swing and really hit your core audience in a way where like they're like, this is why I love him, I die for this stuff, versus watering it down so it's a vanilla version that like, everybody can enjoy, but like there's no connection behind it. And all I could think about is like, that is what I want to see more brands do. The brands that are actually in the world taking big swings that come with big risk and can totally flop are the ones that are actually doing things that are interesting, that are disruptive, and that are resonating with their core audience in a way that keeps them relevant.
Well, yeah, I mean, let's sit on that for a sec because I think that like we talk a lot about this idea of brands being afraid to take risk.
Yeah.
And I think brands are scared to deviate from like, what everyone is talking about because they don't want to alienate anyone because alienating people means less sales or no one cares about your brand, whatever. But like, don't you think that brands that take risk or brands that know themselves really, really well
Yeah.
are ultimately like the ones who create real community or real brand, like
100%.
real, you could say authentic brand, but whatever. But you know what I mean?
Absolutely. I mean, I think about this a lot when we're talking about this idea of like cultural relevance, especially when it pertains to like branded content, right? Because I think you see a lot of conversation now where it's like, well, brand guidelines don't matter and brand books don't matter and those are outdated and all you need to do is create relevant content that like is reacting to culture and it just has to be this sort of like hamster wheel of just putting out whatever is like trending because that's what's going to get you visibility. And I'm like, sure, as like a tactical marketer from a channel like specific perspective, I get that. You want to play nice with the algorithm because you're going to have a higher chance of reaching more people, right? But I'm like, I actually think in a world where that exists, it's even more important to understand your brand deeply and to have those strict parameters around it. Because if you are not looking at everything through that filter, you are just creating things that are for everybody. It has no perspective. You are not actually adding anything new into the mix. And when you talk about it that way, it's like that is the quickest way for you to dilute your brand because then you're just like everybody else. And so I think like that is something that I always come back to because like, yes, on one hand, I understand the sentiment of it. Like we understand social, we know the world that we live in, but I actually think the people who really like that is the hill you're going to die on. I think you deeply don't understand branding.
Well, it's funny because as you're saying this, I think like we talk a lot about like VC firms and PE firms kind
Mm.
of coming in and forcing like the very fast growth of a brand and expansion into retail and blah blah blah. We know this and like I think we should talk about that more because it's a really important um it's an important and significant impact on why brands
Yeah.
have diluted so much. But like if you could look at a brand and say, okay, like a VC firm is making, having them set these goals, go into retail, do all this, you end up diluting the brand, blah, blah, blah. But then you look at actually the parallel to the music industry, you could say, um, music labels are the same thing, right? And so you can have, um, let's say like One Direction, right? They were kind of hands weren't they on X Factor or something? But they were ultimately, like, hand selected and put together by, like, I think Simon Cowell, right? And so they were manufactured to
Mm.
be the boy band that appealed to everyone, right? They were the new iteration of like New Kids on the Block, Backstreet Boys, whatever. And you could say, yeah, you have these firms that are creating products out of thin air to be that, like
Right.
to sell to Target, to sell to Walmart. And so the brand becomes like nothing. But then you have a brand like Fishwife, which is like the tin can or the tin fish, whatever. And like they went with their heart and they created something they loved. And then everyone kind of jumped on board and now they're able to like do what they love because like that was their vision. And you could see that with like an artist who kind of came out of nowhere. I mean, Justin Bieber started so young that you could say that he was super manufactured because he was.
Yeah.
But you could look at other artists who just come through and their personality is so strong because that's what they do, that's what they stand for. Even like a Lady Gaga has earned enough clout, obviously, 'cause she's Lady Gaga, that she gets to kind of do what she wants. I mean,
Yeah.
Taylor Swift, go back to her and say that. She gets to do what she wants because her perspective is what everyone kind of like, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of the same thing with brands of like, like you see that same parallel of just like sometimes you can create something that's super manufactured just to appeal to everyone because it's like a pop song.
Yep.
And you could do that with a product and a brand and it just dilutes it.
Yeah. Well, I think what's interesting about that when we're talking about, I think, brands and the idea of belonging is like what often happens is you have like two avenues you can go, right? I think you have brands that create products that people use. And then you have brands that create identity that really resonates with people and creates this intense sense of community. And I think the life cycle of both of those looks very different. And I think when we're bringing it back to sort of like the VC or the PE world, what they often start with are these brands that create a intense sense of identity because you have people that are so passionate about the brand. It spreads in these communities. They are true brand evangelists because they see something in that brand that resonates with them personally and that they identify with. And so it like they can't not share it, right? And I think you have investors, VCs, PEs that see that. They see that passion, they see that shareability, they see that organic spread, and they think, let's pour fuel on the fire and let's invest. And I think when you do that, what happens is you actually dilute the thing that attracted you to invest in the first place because you end up either scaling it too quickly or you're scaling it in a way that dilutes that identity piece of it. And so it doesn't then resonate with your core fan base anymore. And it also doesn't have enough of that stickiness to really resonate with the mass audience in a way that's going to create longevity. And so it's like you don't have either end of the spectrum. And I think that's where you're seeing a lot of brands fall into today is this space of like, why should I care?
Yeah. I also think to that end, like so much of creating that brand identity is in like the smallest details that
Mhm.
often go unnoticed,
Yeah.
which again is like you could relate it back to Justin Bieber's performance and say like people didn't understand why at the Grammys he was in his underwear. And it was like, well, I'm pretty sure he was like stripped down performing in his bedroom like to his wife or something. Like that was kind of like the overarching narrative. But it's like all of those are really intentional details.
Yeah.
One of my favorite details, which doesn't create community, but it creates like for me, I'm like, that's a really thoughtful detail. Like good
Yep.
culture, like the cottage
Yeah.
cheese. If you look at their barcode, it's illustrated like grass
Oh, I never
because
noticed that.
yeah, because they're cows eating the grass. And so like I think there's a cow in there too. And I'll take a picture of it and I'll send it to you. But like that's so fucking smart.
Yep.
And it's a really subtle detail that I doubt costs them money because 'cause we're just printing it, like, unless a retailer is, like, charging them more to, like, have a different type of barcode, but it's not. It's really is the same exact barcode, it just, like, has that brand nuance that's like, "Fuck yeah, these
Like,
guys get it,"
yeah.
you
Yeah.
know?
Well, I also think when you're talking about this idea of belonging and identity, like want to identify with brands who like signal that you get it, that like you know what's up. And so I think when you see those really smart, clever details, you're like, yeah, like that's something that I want to get behind. Like I am a person who appreciates the details or like has this cool, unexpected thing. And so when I see that in another brand, I'm like, yep, that's my kind of brand. And it's beyond just, I like your product. It's like, I like your philosophy. I like your approach. I like you from like a fundamental we could hang sort of level. I think that's what a lot of brands miss is like, oh, it's going to cost more to do this. It's going to cost more to add that in. No one's going to read that line of copy. And it's like, no, those are the things that actually are going to signal to the right people that you are the brand for them.
And it signals that the brand gives a shit,
Yeah.
which is so important because when you create basically like shots to just like throw on the fucking shelf in like Target, no one cares and everyone can, see through that. But also it like brings through this idea that you and I talk a lot about, which is like, you know, people like brand love, like
Yeah.
actual brand love, like to create community that all these people talk about. You need to create actual brand love. But I think that brands see it so much as a tactic versus like an intention, because I don't think a lot of people know what it really means to create community and have brand love. And
Yeah.
I think it gets lost. I'm
Well,
sure you see that a lot.
I feel like that is something that we see all the time because we're right, like as strategists, you're in the work of the work. Anytime there is something that we are taking on, it's like we're going from ground zero. We're like, let me see the brand book, let me see the guidelines, let's like get in here and talk about it, right? And I think like one of the things, especially now in a culture of like brand optics. And I mean that more in a way of we're going to create these aesthetic things that people want to share, right? And you're creating it for the sake of it being shareable. I think you can create this idea of shareability, but like you can't necessarily engineer for that sense of belonging. And all of these little details that show that you're doing this just because you give a shit as a brand, that is what creates that belonging. And I think like, especially in an age of like culture at large, where like it's cringe to care too much or like to put that much effort in. Like I actually think when you see brands doing it, it's really fucking cool. And it's like they give a shit. They are making something for a consumer. They're having a certain standard. They're putting a certain level of thought into it so that at the end of the day, you're not just buying into another commodity, you're buying into an experience. And I think these small details create things for people to discover. And as you discover it, you are actually experiencing brand. And I think that is where you get hooked and you're into this world of said brand versus I'm just picking this commoditized item off of a shelf.
Well, I think you see that a lot in like when you talk about brand experience, like when you look at a giveaway from a brand, let's say, how
Yes.
often is it a fucking tote? I'm so sick of totes. I have so many fucking totes.
Yeah.
And like, first of all, by the way, and this is where I get crazy, where it's like, if you're gonna give me a tote, think about the drop from
100%.
shoulder. If it's not fucking long enough, I don't want it.
Yep.
And I don't want a bright yellow tote that says like protein chocolate on it. Like
Right.
I'm so sick of like I think people think, "Oh, that's brand experience." And it's like, "No,
Yeah.
that's lazy."
Correct.
Right? Like Justin Bieber's not giving out totes.
And if he
He
would, they would
wouldn't
look like me.
with a yeah, it
Guaranteed
would look a lot
that.
better than that.
That's actually a good transition to the other piece of Coachella that I wanted to talk about, which is also Bieber related, but Mrs. Bieber related. Because
Oh,
I feel like I could not get away from seeing the Rhode experience on TikTok. And I actually think that they are such a good example of a brand that creates experience. And looking at, they had a million different activations, right? They also had a million different like co-branded partners in there. And normally, if it was any other brand, I would be like, that is like so gross or like you're really overdoing it. everything to me felt so intentional and so connected to what their broader marketing ecosystem is putting out right now. And there were two things in particular that I thought were so clever. One, I'm sure leading up to this, you saw the influencer gifting for like the new pimple patches with the balloon that you would pop and like the confetti would come out. Zoe.
You and I are on
Yeah.
bro, you and I are on such different algorithms. I was like, I have not seen Rhode on my algorithm. All I've seen is, like, Vagisil and, like, Poppy.
I'm not even gonna ask you about the Vagisil.
I don't know, it's just, like, a bunch of lesbians, and they're like, "We're at the Vagisil house." I'm like, "What?"
Huh?
I don't know, I don't
Interesting.
know. I really don't
Okay, well,
know.
let me break it down for
But
you then.
please enlighten me
Let me
because
let me educate you.
I'd love to not be on that algorithm.
Great. I'm gonna send you some things that will like maybe get you on the dark side. But
Sure.
leading up to Coachella, so they have like these like pimple patches that they are theoretically launching. And the PR packaging was actually so simple, but it was so smart. So it was sort of like a big PR box with a big balloon that said pop me and a pin, right? And when
Okay.
you popped it, all of the little like pimple patches would come out. And
Fun.
so like in and of itself, I was like, oh, that's a smart gifting experience because in a world of PR boxes where it's like bigger is better and more flashy and blah blah blah, this was a pretty simple way to do it that was like really highly shareable. And so like interesting,
Yeah.
smart. And then you see they pulled it through to the experience at Coachella where they had sort of like these balloon darts that create
Fun.
the same sort of interactive experience. And I was like, wow, what a, again, simple way to create that through line from what you are seeing online in the influencer gifting space to something that you as a consumer can actually participate in and experience. And I think when we're talking about creating one true brand experience, I think that's a great example of it. But two, creating culture.
Mhm.
That to me is so smart because you're creating this moment that everybody is talking about on TikTok. And then you are pulling it forward to an IRL activation where theoretically your average consumer can come in and experience it and feel like they are participating in culture. And I think what differentiates that from a lot of these brand activations, especially at spaces like Coachella, is other brands create a backdrop for content, right? And it's like, hey, can I take a cool picture of this? Or like this swag is something I'm going to like post to my story and then it disappears. Whereas what Rhode does is actually creating a hub for culture to live. And because of that, it's inherently more experiential and it gives people a reason to continue coming back to this brand. And I just thought it was such a well executed, really smart way to pull that strategy forward in a way that doesn't feel over engineered or contrived.
Well, I think I love that, and I think that it's so smart because when you have certain brands, they don't understand the extension of culture, like, into that piece and, like, to, like, touch and feel it and, like, experience it in person, you end up being like, "Oh, we're launching this campaign, let's run, like, a campaign again like, on the side of it where you have to take a picture in front of our billboard and send it to
Yes.
us, and you get, like, 10% discount." Like,
Yeah.
fuck the 10% discount, first of all, like, no one cares.
Thanks, but
Second of all, like, that's not building
correct.
that's not culture, like, you're just manufacturing content that, by the way, like, no one is
No
gonna
one even wants
fucking
to share.
and no one wants to see it. You know what I don't wanna see? Your shitty content in
Correct.
front of a shittier billboard.
Correct. Absolutely.
And, like, it's embarrassing, and so I think it's, like, they conflate this idea of, like, virality, let's say, not even because it's, like, that's not going anywhere, but, like, seeing it posted because someone's like, "Oh, me and my, like, 2 dumb kids posting in front of this billboard," versus, like, all of these people being like, "Look how fucking cool this is and smart," you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, I think, and again, this is something we talk about all the time, and there's a certain level of understanding of culture at large that I think you have to create these moments that are sort of like fueled by that conversation and that genuine excitement. But you have brands that will approach it from a space of we are creating this in service of brand because we want you to share our brand. We want you to take a picture in front of our thing with our
Mm.
branding so that people know and we're using you as a vehicle for awareness versus I
Mhm.
think brands like Rhode where what they do is they genuinely create things for their consumer. It is not self-serving in the way that it's generated. Of course, they
Right.
understand that people are going to share it and it's going to be all over and they too are using their consumers as vehicles, but they are doing it in a way where there is inherent cultural currency built into it so that when their consumers share it, they are saying, "Hey, look at me. I was either at this experience, I saw this thing." And going back to this sense of identity, because I was there, it says XYZ about me. I am in the know. I am cool. I have access, right? So it's a very different thing because the social currency that's built into that build out, that experience, that shareable moment is completely different. It's not self serving. It is actually something that people want to share because it says something about who they are.
Right, and it's why their phone case with the lip gloss did so well
Exactly.
because it's like the girlies wear lip gloss and they always have their phones on them,
Yeah.
and what do? You leave the house, you wanna put your fucking lip gloss
Yeah.
somewhere and not in your pocket.
Exactly. Well, so this was
You know,
an
it's so simple, but they, like, developed something that was uniquely them,
yeah.
specifically for their audience, and it worked.
That's the thing too that I think was so smart. And it's something that I feel like, again, you and I as strategists, I see brands missing the mark on it all the time. What Rode does in its core idea of these activations, of these merch moments, of these product extensions, it's so simple, right? Like they made an iPhone case, to your point, that has a holding spot for lip gloss. That is not necessarily the most revolutionary, innovative like piece of technology or product they could have put out there. But what it does come from is a fundamental core understanding of the pain points of their consumer, right?
Mhm.
What are the fundamental truths that are going to resonate with my customer? They understand that so deeply. And I think when you see brands that really miss the mark on this, again, it's because it's not in service of consumer. They're not taking the time to understand, hey, this is something that like maybe seems so mundane, but it's actually really annoying for our customer to have to deal with. And so let's address that problem. Or this is something that our customer would think is really cool and they would love and it would like make their life a little easier. And like, let's do that and give them something to get excited about. And I think one of the things that I saw at Rhode's Coachella activation that I was like, God, again, so simple, but like fucking brilliant. And I'm going to explain it because I'm going to assume you did not see it on your algorithm. But
Probably
they
not.
did a ride along with 818. And so it was literally a thing that you put over your cup where you could put your lip gloss in it and a little
Mhm.
thing of to go reposado. And it was a cup holder and you had like these things just hanging off your cup. You didn't have to hold it. You didn't have to put it anywhere. It's just like boom, an easy thing that you're carrying around. And I'm like, how brilliant. Because again, you are understanding the pain points of your core consumer in the spaces that they are currently existing, and you're giving them something to surprise and delight that they are then like, this is so smart. I'm sharing this. It's brilliant.
Well, that's brilliant because it's also so simple. And,
So
like,
simple.
again, like, we've talked a bit about, like, you know, taste and style and all this, and, like, the emphasis on the importance of, like, restraint.
Yes.
And I think when you look at something that's simple, you're like, what is the exact need of the exact person that's here? And what is like a very clever and simple way that we can do it? And it's you're not over engineering it. I
No.
actually, this is so funny. It's like, it's not an apples to apples example, but when I was building a pop up with a brand like 6 or 7 years ago, we were trying to get as much sponsored as we could because, you know, you're trying to bring it together in a cost
Yeah.
effective way and make everything cool and branded, whatever. And we were like, how can we get Mrs. Myers to sponsor the bathroom? And we went through every avenue of like reaching out to people and this and that and DMing them. And then at some point, like I like specifically remember our COO being like, hey, what if you just bought a bottle of Mrs. Myers and put it in the bathroom? Everyone was like, oh. And it was like,
That.
how simple is that solution? And you've branded it yourself. And it
Yeah.
was like, you because sometimes you think as a marketer, like, I gotta think of the most clever way in. It has to be like more is more is more is more is more. And like that's not the fucking case. Like the case is like, is it simple? Does it make sense? And does it like immediately feel understood by the person you're trying to talk to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like again, going back to what we were talking about earlier about like those little details that show intention and thoughtfulness, like those I find end up being the things that resonate most with your consumer because they feel like understood and considered and like, wow, this brand actually gives a shit about the things that like I find to be annoying or I find to be a pain point, and they're doing it in such a thoughtful way that it feels like it's specifically for you. And I think,
Yep,
again, going back to that sense of really creating identity and true community, those are the signals that you want to put out there into the world so that people feel seen, they feel understood, they feel like, wow, this is a brand that understands me and gives a shit. And that's where you're going to see people rallying behind brand because they feel like every single thing this brand puts out into the world is thoughtfully designed for me.
totally. I also, I don't know if you saw this. Again, it's like some bizarre algorithm I'm on. And I think it was Olipop, but they did a partnership with like Good Wipes or something. I've never heard of them.
Oh, okay.
And
I
they,
saw this, but I scrolled past it. So download me.
I I think that Tinks actually posted about it, which she was excited about it, sure, whatever.
Correct.
I don't know who the Good Wipes demo is or whatever, but like they did a sponsored kind of little pop up outside of the bathrooms
Okay.
at some of the spots in Coachella. And it's smart in that you're integrating your brand into a wipe station
Mm,
when everyone probably feels fucking disgusting near the bathrooms and like just in general, like whatever.
yeah.
But then I was like, oh, that's smart, that's cute. And then I was like, why? Like, why are you inserting yourself? And it wasn't like a scented good white. I don't think it was like a scent or something where it like linked back to Olipop. It was just like they just sponsored it and like probably
Mm,
co-brought it to life to get their brand in that specific space where you're like, oh my God, you're near the bathroom. Haha, let me take a picture of it. But it's like there was the why was like,
yeah.
okay,
Yeah.
you know? I found
Okay.
that to be a little bit weird. I don't know if you saw did you see any other like weird ones like that?
I'd have to like go back and look, but I feel like I'm always so interested of like what are the conversations that happen in those rooms when those sorts of partnerships are decided because I think as a marketer, our first instinct is to be like, well, what's the story? What's the why? How does this make sense?
Yeah,
Versus I think a lot of I don't know, a lot of times I'm like, does that conversation happen? Or like, if so, how far is the leap that you have to make to like make these things make sense? Because like, if I'm a marketer who's theoretically thinking about this all the time, it should be the quickest connection for me. And then like, if it's not apparent for me, how weird does this feel to like just an average consumer who's not thinking about it in this way?
totally. I know. I think that sometimes it's like you have the it's like you have a room filled with so many marketers that sometimes you kind of like lose the plot and you're like
Yeah.
you like again you're kind of either over engineering something and like being like, "Oh, this is so us," but you're just kind
Yeah.
of like what's it called like navel gazing where it's like you're just speaking to yourself. I don't know.
I mean,
Fucking corporate lingo. But like you're just speaking to yourself, but I think that there's a difference between speaking to yourself as a brand and speaking to the people who love your brand, who probably
100%.
love it in a different way
Yes.
than you're putting it out there. Like conceptually the same or like the same category, but like it's from a different perspective, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah. Well, I think that is kind of bringing it full circle to where we started, right? Of like, there is a scenario in which talking to yourself is okay when it is your core demographic. And I think
Right.
that is so intentionally constructed. And I think, again, bringing in the example of Rhode, it's done off of such a deep understanding of your core customer and this insight into like, what is their everyday life? What are the things that like annoy them, excite them, thrill them, like that they would just be like dead over because you thought of this tiny little detail that like so perfectly reflects them. I think that's talking to yourself in the best way possible because like it's not for your fringe customers. It's not for the mass audience. It's to say to your core consumer base, like, we see you, we appreciate you. Here's something just for you guys. And like it's cool that nobody else gets it. That's actually kind of the point. And so I think it's like, what are those instances where like you do need to be talking to yourself in terms of like that actual core consumer versus what are the moments where you need to have this broader appeal? And then how do you do that in a way that still feels very true and tethered to brand? It just perhaps is a little bit more approachable and less insidery. And I think that is where brands don't often, but can strike a really perfect balance of speaking to like their loyalists, their core consumers, while also doing things in a way that have mass market appeal, but don't feel mass market dilution.
Totally. Well, I am curious to see what will come of Coachella weekend too.
Same.
And also, um, I don't know if you saw the billboards.
Yes.
Like I've never been to Coachella, so I didn't know about the billboards, but this year was like all about billboards.
Yeah.
And I feel like those and I know we're almost at time, but like those were so much fun because they weren't in like the brand box,
Yeah.
but they spoke to their consumers or their audience in a way that was so specific because it was like for the first time ever they could be like a little loose with it, you
Yeah.
know, and they can have fun. And I think that's also what always is missing is like there's no fun. It's always so serious. Like you know, this is a brand activation, and it's like no, you're at Coachella and everyone's fucked up and listening to music. So like make it a little bit fun, which is what I think to bring it full circle. It's the Vagisil is what that's about. Like I think they're in on the joke. I don't know. I have to do some research on it a bit more, but don't know.
I mean,
Anyway. Well, that's Coachella for you. That's Vagisil and Justin Bieber.
Also, like Vagisil in a dry, arid desert, like kind of funny.
I love it. Okay. Well, this has been amazing.
Thanks so much for having me.